The black waitress poured coffee on the table to stop the Korean CEO from signing the contract. She poured the coffee on the table before anyone could stop it. The contract was soaked with coffee. His suit, his hand, the pen still in it. Everything soaked through in one moment. The man across from him stood up angrily.
What is wrong with you? We didn't even order coffee!
The whole restaurant turned, and the man, the one who was supposed to sign the contract, did not move, did not speak. He just looked at her quietly. She did it deliberately. She knew this was going to cost her something, but she did it anyway. If you're already wondering why a waitress would try to stop a billionaire from signing his contract, then let us back to where it all started. But before we do, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because this is going to be a very thrilling story. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Now, before we go any further, we've got a gift for you. Click on the link in the description below to join our waitlist for your free ebook, How to Attract a High-Value Man Without Chasing. Now let's go back to the beginning. Anna's father was not a man who talked about what he had. He just had it. And he made sure his family had it too. He used his trading business between New York and South Korea to keep the lights on and the refrigerator full, and put a gold necklace around his daughter's neck on her 7th birthday. He had built it carefully, the way a man builds something he intends to last, one decision at a time, one honest transaction at a time. The business had come through his brother. Daniel Cole had been living in Seoul for years by the time he called James with the opportunity. He had contacts. He had connections that moved goods between South Korea and America in volumes that made serious money. He knew people, and he knew his brother in New York was working hard for modest returns, and he wanted better for him. James had listened. And then James had asked the question that mattered. Because he was not a naive man, he understood that businesses operating between two countries at that kind of volume did not always stay entirely on the right side of things. He had heard enough to know that. And he had a daughter, and a wife, and a life he had built on the specific foundation of being a man his family could be proud of. So he told Daniel directly. "I'm only interested in the legal side only," he said. "I'm not interested in anything else. Whatever else is moving through this business, I don't want to know about it, and I don't want any part of it." Daniel had agreed. He had agreed the way you agree with a man you have known your whole life, when you have already decided that what he doesn't know won't hurt him, warmly, completely, without hesitation. James believed him. He believed him because Daniel was his brother, because they had grown up in the same house and carried the same name, and he had no framework for the possibility that the person who shared his blood would agree to something with his mouth and do something else entirely with his hands. He was wrong about that. He was wrong about it for 10 years. And then one Tuesday morning in New York, James Cole died. Annabelle knew something was wrong before anyone told her anything. She knew it in her mother's face. She had come home from school on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, and her mother was sitting in the kitchen, and something about the way she was sitting, not the crying came later, but the way she was just sitting, still in a way she had never been still before, like something had gone out of her that Anna did not have a name for yet. She stood in the doorway, with her school bag still on her back, and looked at her mother's face, and felt the floor of the world shift under her feet before a single word had been spoken. Her mother looked up, and Anna knew. She didn't know what. She didn't know how. She was 8 years old, and her vocabulary for loss had not been built yet. But she knew that whatever her mother's face was telling her was the kind of thing you did not come back from the same way you went in. Her father had been in South Korea for a business trip. "Car accident," they said, when the words finally came. The adults in the room, with their careful voices and their careful faces and the specific gentleness of people delivering something they know will break what it lands on. "Car accident." She stood at his grave in a black dress that was slightly too big for her, and she held the gold necklace at her throat with both hands, and she cried until there was nothing left inside her to cry with. She just wanted her daddy back. That was all. That was the whole of it. She just wanted him to come through the door, the way he always came through the door, and for the apartment to exhale, the way it always exhaled when he was in it, and for everything to go back to the way it was 6 days ago, when the world still made sense, and she still had everything she needed in it. He did not come back, and the world did not go back. And Anna was 8 years old, with a mother whose face had changed and would never quite change back. Her mother tried to hold things together. She really did. In the beginning, she got up every morning and made breakfast and kept the apartment clean and smiled when Anna was watching. She did all the things that looked like holding on. And Anna was grateful for those things even at her young age, because she understood, without being told, that her mother was doing them for her. That the smiling and the cooking and the getting up were acts of love even when they cost everything. But grief is not just something that lives in the mind. It gets into the body. It got into her mother's body the way water gets into old walls, slowly, invisibly, weakening the structure from the inside, until one day, things that were holding simply aren't anymore. Her mother started getting headaches that kept her in bed for days. Then the fatigue that no amount of sleep seemed to touch. Then the mornings she couldn't get up at all, and Anna would make her own breakfast and sit at the table alone and listen to the quiet of the apartment and feel the shape of everything that was missing. She watched her mother get smaller, not in size, in presence. The way she sat sometimes by the window and looked at nothing. The way she stopped finishing her sentences. The way the light in her eyes was dimming so slowly that if you weren't watching carefully, you would miss it entirely. Anna was watching carefully. Anna was always watching. She sat on the edge of her mother's bed one night. She was 9 years old, almost 10, old enough to understand that something was very wrong, and not old enough to know what to do about it. And she held her mother's hand and said things no child should ever have to say. Please, you have to fight. I'm still here. I'm still here, Mama. Isn't that enough? Her mother squeezed her hand. She looked at Anna with eyes that still had love in them, that would always have love in them. But underneath the love was something exhausted and far away. Something that had been fighting for 2 years and was running out of fight. She squeezed her hand, and she was already somewhere else. The stroke came on a Thursday morning. 2 years after James Cole was buried, his wife followed him. That was what they called it, a stroke. And it was a stroke. The doctor said so, and the paperwork said so, and Anna never argued with any of it out loud. But she had watched it happen. She had watched it happen too slowly to call it anything other than what it really was. A woman whose body broke under the weight of a grief her spirit had already surrendered to. A woman who had lost the reason she wanted to stay and whose body eventually agreed. Anna was 10 years old when she lost her mother, when everything would change, and all she had was a suitcase. Her father's file of documents that she carried because it was the last piece of him that existed in the world, and the gold necklace at her throat that she held so tightly the whole flight to Seoul that when she finally let go, the clasp had left a mark pressed deep into her palm. Her uncle, Daniel Cole, came to collect her. He was her father's brother, same blood, same surname, and that, all of that, was where every similarity ended. His house in Seoul was large, larger than anywhere Anna had ever lived, and from the very first night, it was the coldest place she had ever been in her life. Not the temperature, the feeling. There were doors in that house that were always locked. Hours where she was told, without explanation, to stay in her room. Men who came after dark, quiet men who never looked at her directly, and Daniel would appear from wherever he was and speak to them briefly and take them down the hallway to the room at the back where the voices dropped too low to reach her. His own children were in boarding schools in the UK. All of them. The best schools money could find. Far from Seoul. Far from this house. Far from whatever their father was building behind those locked doors. And Anna, his dead brother's only child, was in the middle of all of it, and for some reason, that was all right. She did not understand everything she was seeing. She was 10, then 11, then 12, but she understood enough. She understood that this house had a version of itself. It showed in the daytime, and a different version that came out after dark. She understood that Daniel Cole had kept his brother's child close for a reason that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with obligation. They treated her like furniture, sent her to the cheapest schools, made no real plans for her. She learned Korean the way you learn a language, when survival depends on it, completely and fast. She learned to move through rooms without disturbing anything. She learned that silence was the only safe currency in that house. She learned to watch everything and show nothing. She grew up with her eyes wide open and her mouth firmly closed. And she waited. She was 13 the night she went through her father's file. It was late. The house was quiet. She had taken the file out so many times since she arrived in Seoul, not looking for anything specific, just wanting to feel close to him. Running her fingers over his handwriting, reading the names of places he had been, trying to find him somewhere in the pages. She spread the documents across her bed and read slowly. Business records, trade correspondence, transactions. She was too young to fully understand. And that was when she saw it. A Korean surname, sitting near the bottom of one page, attached to a transaction that had taken place 3 days before her father died. She stared at it. She read it again. She was 13, and she did not know exactly what she was looking at, but something in her body responded to it before her understanding could catch up. Something tightened. Something that had been floating loose inside her since the day she stood at her father's grave suddenly found something to hold on to. She looked at the date of the transaction. She looked at the amount. She looked at where her uncle's name appeared, 2 lines below it. She lay in the dark for a long time that night, thinking about a car accident that had happened 5 years ago, thinking about how final it had been, how clean, how nobody had ever asked any questions she could remember, how her uncle had arrived so quickly after her mother died, how there had been nothing left for her, no properties, no savings, nothing that should have been there from a man who had built what her father built. Nothing. She didn't tell anyone what she was thinking. She was 13 and alone in a foreign country, in a house that frightened her, and there was nobody to tell. She just folded that page carefully, put the file away, and made a note of the surname in the back of her mind where she kept the things that mattered most. From that night forward, every time she heard that surname, at school, in the market, on the street, anywhere, her body stopped. Not slowed, stopped, before her mind could catch up. Before she could tell herself it was just a name and to keep moving. Her body never believed it was just a name, and it never let her forget. At 15, she asked about her father's properties. She had been thinking about it for 2 years by then, since the night she found the file. Since the night, a Korean surname had locked itself into her body and refused to leave. She had been watching Daniel's house with new eyes since that night. The locked doors, the late visitors, the whispers, and the more she watched, the more certain she became that her father had not just died. He had been removed. And everything he had built had been taken with him. She needed to go to a school that would teach her how to prove it. A proper school. A forensic investigation program that would give her the tools to do what she had already decided she was going to do. And for that, she needed money. And the money that should have been hers was sitting somewhere inside the life Daniel Cole had built for himself while she cleaned his house and minded her place and made herself useful enough to keep. She went to her aunt, not Daniel. She was 15 and already wise enough to know that going to Daniel directly was a different kind of conversation. She kept her voice level, kept her hands still, asked carefully and quietly, the way you ask for things. In a house where the wrong question, delivered the wrong way, has consequences you will feel for weeks. Her aunt's face closed like a door being shut. "Don't," she said, "just that. Don't ask about this again, and don't let your uncle hear you asking." The warning was severe enough to teach her that patience was the only thing standing between her and something worse. So she waited. She watched. She kept learning. She kept adding to the picture she was building in the back of her mind. What Daniel was doing in those locked rooms. Why her father's name kept appearing in places it shouldn't. What the surname in that file connected to. And what it meant that Daniel had been the one to put her father in that business in the first place. 3 years she waited. 3 years of cleaning and cooking and being invisible and watching and filing everything away in the place inside her where she kept the things that mattered. At 18, she came back. This time she did not go to her aunt. This time she walked directly to Daniel Cole, with her father's file in her hands and every document she had been quietly studying for 5 years. And she stood in front of the man who had brought her to this country and kept her in this house, and looked at him with the specific stillness of a woman who has been patient long enough. She told him she was ready for college. She told him she needed the money her father had left. She told him she had the documents to prove it existed: business records, property holdings, transaction records, all of it. She had built a case the way she had been teaching herself to build cases. Carefully, with evidence. She was not even halfway through the sentence when his hand came across her face. The sound of it filled the room. Her head turned with the force of it. She stood completely still. The burning spread across her cheek in a slow wave, and the file was still in her other hand, and she did not cry. She did not step back. She did not make a sound. Daniel Cole looked at her with the specific fury of a man who has just been made to feel accused by someone he considers beneath him. How dare she? How dare she stand in his house? His house, the roof he had put over her head, the food he had put in her mouth for 8 years, and call him a thief? What kind of ungrateful, shameless, disrespectful child stood in front of the man who had taken her in when she had nothing and waved papers in his face like an accusation? There were no properties. There was nothing. Her father had left nothing because her father had been a fool who didn't know how to hold on to what he had. And she had the audacity, the absolute audacity. He had fulfilled his obligation. She was 18. She was an adult. She could leave. She looked at him. She looked at the man who had taken her father's business contacts and his properties and his money and his life and reduced all of it to a child living in his house like a servant. And she looked at him and she understood something that she had been circling for 5 years and was now completely certain of. He knew. He had always known. He knew what happened to James Cole and why. And he had brought his brother's daughter to Seoul and kept her close, not out of obligation or family feeling, but because a child in the house was easier to manage than a question left unanswered in New York. She looked at him for 1 moment longer. Then she picked up her bag. And she left. She did not slam the door. She did not cry in the corridor. She did not give that house or that man any more of herself than she had already been forced to give. She walked out into the Seoul street, and the cold air hit her face, and something that had been locked tight inside her chest for 8 years opened. Not relief exactly. Something harder than relief. A decision that had just become permanent. She was going to find out what happened to James Cole. Not someday. Not when she had more resources or more time or more of anything. Now. From here. With what she had and what she knew. And what she was going to spend the rest of her life becoming. Nobody was going to give her the truth. So she was going to go and take it. The cold Seoul air hit her face the moment she stepped through that gate, and her lungs opened in a way they had not opened in 8 years. She had expected to feel the loss of it, even that terrible small shelter. She had thought leaving would cost her something. It didn't. It felt like putting down something heavy that she had been carrying for so long she had stopped noticing the weight. She stood on that street with one bag, her father's file pressed against her chest, the gold necklace at her throat, and she made herself a promise. Not out loud, not with tears, just a quiet, complete, unmovable decision made by a girl who had been watching and waiting and carrying this thing alone for 10 years and was done doing it quietly. She was going to find out what really happened to James Cole. The surname in that file was not just a name, and she was going to find out whose name it was, even if it took her the rest of her life. Surviving Seoul alone was a different kind of hard. Not the suffocating, shrinking hard of Daniel's house. That had been a slow poison, the kind that gets into the walls of a person so gradually they forget what it felt like before it arrived. This was different. This came at her from every direction at once, and it did not apologize for itself, and it did not slow down for her to catch her breath. Rent, food, transport, school fees that looked like a cruel joke when you were standing in front of them with an empty account and no one in this entire city whose number you could call. She was 19 years old, with a promise she had made to a dead man, and absolutely nothing else. She worked whatever she could find. cleaning offices before the sun came up, nannying for families who paid her too little for too many hours and sent her home smelling like other people's children. She would come back to her small apartment at night with her feet aching and her textbooks sitting exactly where she had left them that morning, untouched, patient, waiting for a version of her that had more hours left in the day. Some nights, she sat at her small table and looked at those books and felt the dream of becoming a detective start to feel like something she had imagined rather than something she had decided. On those nights, she would take out her father's file. She would find the page, the Korean man with the surname sitting near the bottom, like it had always been there, like it had always been waiting. And she would remember why she was doing this. Then she would get up the next morning and do it again. It was Park Soyi who changed things. Soyi sat beside her in two of her forensic investigation classes and existed with the particular ease of a girl who had grown up never once worrying about where the money was coming from. Everything about university life amused her. She moved through it, the way people move through places that were built for them, unhurried, unbothered, completely at home. But she was warm, genuinely and completely warm in the way that some people are warm, the way that has nothing to do with circumstance and everything to do with character. She smiled at Anna the first week like she had been specifically waiting for her to arrive and had been wondering what was taking so long. Their friendship started because Anna understood the coursework and Soyi did not. What Soyi told her father was that Anna was her study partner. What actually happened was that Anna read and understood, and Soyi sat beside her and copied everything down with the focused energy of a woman who had made her peace with this arrangement and saw no reason to change it. Both of them understood this completely. Neither of them ever acknowledged it out loud. It worked. They left it alone. When Soyi told her father, who owned Hanok, one of the most prestigious restaurants in all of Seoul, that her grades had survived the entire semester because of one person, he offered Anna a job before the week was out. The pay was nearly double a day, what the nanny work paid her in a week. For the first time since she had walked out of Daniel's gate, Anna felt the pressure behind her eyes ease, just slightly. Just enough to remember what breathing felt like when it wasn't costing her something. She had been working at Hanok for a year now. She knew the rhythm of the place the way you know something you have done every day until it has become part of your body. The right way to move through a full floor on a busy evening without disturbing anything. The way to carry 3 plates and make it look effortless. The way to appear in a room full of wealthy people without appearing in it at all, present and invisible simultaneously, part of the furniture, background, necessary, and unseen. She had made her peace with that. It was not a small piece. It had taken work to build. But furniture hears everything, and she was always listening, and she had learned more about how power moves through a room by serving it dinner than she would ever have learned sitting at the same table. It was an ordinary Tuesday shift. She had changed into her uniform, tied her hair back. She was heading down the back corridor toward the floor with a purposeful step, still mentally reviewing the chapter she had been trying to finish before her shift started, when the voice reached her from behind the bathroom door, and her body stopped. Not slowed, stopped. The way it had been stopping since she was 13 years old in Daniel's house with her father's file spread across her bed, before her mind had finished processing anything. Before she had even consciously registered what she had heard. Her feet locked to the floor. Her breath pulled tight. Her whole body went to attention the way it always did when that surname arrived in a room, because the man behind that door had just said that surname, Kang. She stood completely still in that corridor. His voice was low and tight, in the way of a man who has been waiting longer than he was willing to accept and has arrived at the end of his patience without quite meaning to. He was on the phone, talking to someone in his Korea dialect, and he was already getting impatient. Kang Mirae, he said. The full name. Both words. Said the way you say the name of a woman you have been alone with so many times that all the professional distance has burned away, and what is left is just the specific frustration of a man whose plan depends on a woman who is taking too long. How much longer? I have been sitting in this bathroom for 40 minutes. 40 minutes, Mireille. he said, almost irritated. You know he'd ask me questions, considering the fact I've been sitting in the restroom for over 49 minutes. I don't want him suspicious. We need to get this done. Just finalize the transfer. He signs, we get what we want. That is all. How difficult is this? Anna stood in that corridor with the surname moving through her the way it always moved through her, cold and total and spreading before she could contain it. Her hand found the wall beside her without her telling it to. But she stayed. Because underneath the shock of hearing it again, her mind had already started working. The part of her that had been training itself since she was a teenager, reading detective novels in Daniel's house, while strange men whispered down the hallway, that part had already registered the shape of what she was hearing. A man in a bathroom, waiting for a signal, a transfer that needed to clear before something could be signed. Two people coordinating something with the ease of people who had coordinated things before. A timing that mattered to both of them. And the person on the other end of that phone was named Kang. She stood there until the voice went quiet. Then she made herself move, made herself walk back out onto the floor and pick up where she had left off, like the ground had not just shifted under her feet. That was when she saw him for the first time, sitting alone at the window table, his golden hair catching the warm light of the restaurant in a way that made her glance once and then again before she could help it. Even sitting, he took up space in the specific way of a man who had never had to make himself smaller for anyone, broad across the shoulders, a jaw that could have been architectural, the kind of build that his fitted dark suit was doing absolutely nothing to hide. Where his sleeves were pushed up at the wrist, she caught the edge of ink, a tattoo, dark against his skin. The beginning of something larger that the fabric covered. He was looking at his watch. Then at the corridor that led to the restroom. Then at his watch again. He was waiting for someone. And whoever it was had been making him wait long enough that the stillness he was maintaining was starting to cost him something. She looked away, told herself firmly she had work to do. Men who sat at window tables in restaurants like this one were above her league in every possible way. And that was simply a fact she had made her peace with and was not going to revisit tonight of all nights. He glanced at her once. Maybe he felt her looking. Maybe he just noticed her the way you notice someone who has been looking at you. But he glanced up, and their eyes met for exactly 1 second before she pulled hers away. She went back to work. She was still thinking about the man in the bathroom. She was telling herself what she always told herself when her instincts started pulling her towards something that was not her business. It is not your concern. You don't know these people. You heard a phone call. That is all you heard. Walk away. Do your job. Go home. She had been having this argument with herself for 20 minutes, and she was losing it. Because she knew what she had heard. She had grown up in a house full of closed doors and low voices and things happening in rooms she was not supposed to enter, and she had developed a sense for the specific shape of a plan being executed against someone who didn't know. It was coming. It didn't announce itself. It didn't come with obvious signs. It came with the ease of it. The comfort of two people moving pieces while the person being moved had no idea the board even existed. And then Tae-sung walked out of the bathroom. She watched him come through the restaurant, jacket straightened, face arranged, moving with the unhurried ease of a man who had just finished a phone call that had taken longer than expected and had a perfectly reasonable explanation ready for anyone who asked. Nothing about him looked like a man who had been sitting in a bathroom for 40 minutes waiting for a woman named Kang Mirai to finalize a transfer so a trap could be closed. Nothing except the fact that Anna had been standing in that corridor. She watched him reach the window table. She watched him sit down across from Jihan. And she watched Jihan's whole body settle. That was the thing that did it. Not the phone call, not the surname, not even the 20 minutes in the bathroom. It was that. The specific way Jihan's shoulders came down when Tae-sung sat across from him. The unconscious exhale of a man who has been waiting and has just been handed the presence of the one person whose presence has always been enough to make the worrying stop. Years of trust sitting in the way a man's body relaxes when his partner finally arrives. And Tae-sung knew it. She could see that he knew it, could see it in the way he leaned in, warm, unhurried, The practiced ease of a man who had been using that trust like a key for a very long time and had never once been made to feel the weight of what he was doing with it. He was explaining himself, whatever version of the 50 minutes he had decided to offer. And Jihan was listening and nodding and reaching for the folder on the table the way a man reaches for something when the last of his resistance has been quietly, expertly removed. His hand closed around the pen. Something rose up in Anna that she did not have a name for. Not anger exactly. Something older than anger. Something that had been sitting in the back of her chest since she was 8 years old, watching adults move pieces around a board while the people who mattered most to her had no idea they were on it. Her father had trusted his brother. Her father was dead. And here was another man, sitting at a window table in a restaurant in Seoul with his shoulders down and his guard completely open, about to sign something that the woman on that phone call had needed 40 minutes to arrange before his pen could touch it. She looked at the coffee jug in her hand. Someone on the other side of the restaurant had ordered it. It had nothing to do with the window table. There was wine already open between them. There was no professional reason in the world for her to walk toward that table, and every professional reason to turn around and deliver the coffee to the people who had actually asked for it. She looked at the pen moving toward the paper, and she walked toward it anyway. She reached the table and set the tray down with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been doing this for a year. "Your coffee, sirs." She said it brightly, already pulling the cups from the tray before either of them could process that they had not ordered coffee and had no idea why there was a woman placing cups on their table with the cheerful confidence of someone doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing. No hesitation. No pause that might invite a question. Just movement. Efficient. Professional. Completely normal. She lifted the jug, poured into Taesung's cup first, perfectly, steadily. The hand of a woman who had been doing this every shift for a year and had never once spilled a drop. The coffee hit the cup cleanly, and she straightened and smiled at nothing in particular and turned to Jihan's cup. And then her hand started shaking. Not dramatically, not in a way that announced itself, just a small tremor, the kind that happens when a tray is slightly heavier than expected, or a wrist turns at the wrong angle, or someone who has been on their feet for 6 hours simply loses their grip for one unfortunate second. The coffee went everywhere. Over the rim of the cup, across the contract, across the folder, across Jihan's hand and the pen still in it, and the sleeve of a suit that had absolutely no business being in the path of a coffee jug, but was now soaked through from wrist to elbow. It spread across the pages in a dark, unstoppable wave and dripped from the edge of the table before anyone in the room had finished processing what had just happened. Oh, her hand flew to her mouth. Oh no, oh I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Her face was a perfect portrait of mortified horror, wide eyes, open mouth, the specific expression of a woman who has just done the most catastrophic thing possible in the most catastrophic setting possible and cannot believe her own hands. It was the performance of her life, and not a single person at that table could prove it was anything other than exactly what it looked like. Taesung was on his feet before the sound of the chair had finished scraping. "What is wrong with you?" His voice cracked across the quiet of the restaurant like something had been thrown. Every head in the room turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Cutlery went still. "We didn't even order coffee. Are you blind? Do you have eyes? Look at what you have done." He was gesturing at the contract, at the table, at Jihan's soaked sleeve, with the specific fury of a man whose carefully constructed plan has just been interrupted by a waitress with a coffee jug, and he cannot say so out loud, so all of it is coming out as rage about the coffee. Anna kept her head down. "I'm very sorry. Oh my, I am so sorry." She was reaching for napkins, reaching for the tray, dabbing at nothing useful, performing horror at her own clumsiness with the dedication of a woman who had made a decision and was now committing to it completely. Her hands were not shaking. Her heart was not racing. She was the calmest person at that table, and she was going to make absolutely sure nobody knew it. Jihan had not stood up. He was still sitting exactly where he was, looking at the ruined contract, then looking at her, not with anger, with something she couldn't read. In the half-second, She allowed herself to look back. Taesung was still going. This is a $6,000 suit. Do you understand what that means? Do you know what you have done? You will not work in this city again. I promise you that. Oh. Taesung. One word, quiet, from Jihan. Taesung stopped. Jihan looked at the table, looked at the state of everything, then looked up at Anna with that expression she still couldn't name. You've made quite a mess, he said, calm in the way that expensive things are calm, unhurried. I know, I'm so sorry. I am so incredibly sorry. It's all right. He stood. These things happen. Taesung looked at his partner like he had lost his mind. Then he straightened his jacket. Wait here, Jihan. I have another copy in the car. We can still get this done today. He walked out toward the entrance with the focused energy of a man who has come too far to let a coffee spill stop him. The moment he was through the door, Anna turned to Jihan. I can show you to the restroom, sir. Again, I am so sorry about this. Of course, he said. He followed her out of the main dining room, down the corridor, away from every other pair of ears in the building. And the moment they were far enough, Anna stopped walking. She turned around, and she said it in Korean, quiet and clear and direct. Don't sign those papers. Jihan stopped. The expression that crossed his face was layered in a way she didn't have time to read. Surprise first. Then the Korean, clean and precise, coming from a black American woman in a waitress uniform in a Seoul restaurant. You speak Korean? That's beside the point, Anna said, her voice steady, her eyes on his face. Don't sign those papers. I didn't pour that coffee by mistake. I didn't even need to serve your table. I've probably just lost my job for doing this, but don't sign those papers. He looked at her for a moment, really looked at her. The way people look at something unexpected, that they are trying to decide whether to trust. Why? He said. Just that, quiet and direct. Because that man was not in the bathroom. Because he needed the bathroom, Anna said. He was on the phone. I heard him. He has been in there for almost an hour waiting for somebody, a woman, to finalize a transfer, he told her. The moment it clears, he walks out and you sign. Whatever is in that contract, something needed to be arranged first, on her end, before your pen touched that paper. She watched his face move through confusion and arrive at something colder. What woman? He said. She called her by her full name, Anna said. Kang Mirai. That is who he was talking to. That is who told him to wait. Something crossed Jihan's face that came from somewhere private and returned there just as quickly, like a door opening 1 inch and then closing again before anything could get through it. Then his voice went cold in a way it had not been before. How do you know my girlfriend's name? Not a question. The shape of one without the warmth of one. A part of her heart broke when he said that word. Not because she had built anything. Not because she had allowed herself anything beyond a single moment of noticing a man across a restaurant floor and immediately looking away. But because she was human, and he was standing right in front of her, and the word girlfriend landed the way those words land when you were not expecting to need to hear them. She felt it for exactly 1 second. Then she set it down. I'm just telling you what I heard, she said, her voice giving nothing away, her face giving nothing away. I don't know the full details. I only know what I overheard. And I'm probably going to lose my job for what I just did out there. But something is going on, and you should not sign anything until you know what you are actually signing. She held his gaze for 1 moment. And I'm sorry about your suit, she said. And she turned and walked back toward the restaurant floor. She hated this about herself sometimes. The way her instincts refused to stay in their lane. The way she could not walk past something that smelled wrong without her entire body pulling toward it. Her father's death had done this to her, had made her into a woman who was always reading, always listening, always following the thing that didn't add up to wherever it led, regardless of what it cost her to follow it. She didn't know yet what this particular thing was going to cost. She didn't know yet what it was going to give her in return. She just walked back onto the floor and picked up where she had left off and tried to ignore the feeling sitting in the back of her chest that told her something had just begun. When she got back to the main floor, Taesung was already at the manager's desk. She saw it the moment she walked through. The way the manager was listening, the way Taesung's hand moved once in her direction, without looking at her. She knew before she reached her station. She had known the moment the coffee spilled on that table that this was going to cost her something. She had done it anyway. Tae-sung found her before she could finish the shift. He came close, kept his voice low. The specific low of a man who wants to make sure what he is saying lands without giving anyone else the satisfaction of hearing it. Clumsy, careless people have no business serving anyone, he said pleasantly. You will not find work like this again. I will make sure of it. She was still standing there when Jihan walked out of the restroom. He saw Tae-sung beside her. Something moved across his face. He looked at Tae-sung standing that close to her, and something went still in his eyes. Leave her, he said. Simple, final. Jihan, she destroyed your... I said leave her. We need to go. He picked up his jacket from the table, walked toward the exit. Tae-sung had no choice but to follow. He caught up and fell into step beside him, and his voice dropped low with the urgency of a man whose entire plan is walking out the door with his best friend. You haven't signed. Jihan, we need to do this today. The contract. Jihan stopped walking. He turned around, slowly, and he looked at Lim Tae-sung, his partner of 12 years. The man who had been in the room for every decision he had ever made. The man he had trusted without question for over a decade. And something in the way he looked at him was different. Not angry. Worse than angry. Seeing. We'll discuss it later, Jihan said. Each word placed with a deliberateness that had nothing to do with the contract and everything to do with what he was looking at right now. Let's go. He walked out. The door closed behind them. Anna stood on the restaurant floor in the sudden quiet of it. What Jihan carried out of that restaurant was not the ruined contract. It was a question that had been sitting at the back of his mind for 3 years and had just been handed a face. He had been dating Kang Mirai for 3 years. She had come into his life the way certain things come, not through his own searching, but through his father, who had mentioned one evening with studied casualness that a woman from a good family had expressed interest in him. Jihan had been skeptical. He was always skeptical of things that arrived too neatly. But Mirai had turned out to be everything she appeared. Intelligent, composed, the kind of woman who moved through rooms with a calm that made other people feel chaotic by comparison. He had started to fall in love with her. He had almost let himself. But there was something. There had always been something. A thing he could not name that sat at the back of rooms when the three of them were together. Him, Mirai, Tae-sung. He could have sworn, the very first time he introduced them, that the pause between them was a half-second too short. That the way Mirai extended her hand was the way you extend your hand to someone you already know when other people are watching. He had mentioned it to Mirai once. She had looked at him with the patient exhaustion of a woman who loved a man who didn't trust what he had. You're paranoid, Jihan, said softly, with her hand on his face. I have never met him before. He had believed her. He had chosen to believe her because the alternative, that the two people he trusted most in the world had been lying to him with the easy comfort of people who had been doing it long enough to forget it cost anything, was not something he was ready to sit with. And then a black woman in a waitress uniform had poured coffee on his contract and told him not to sign anything, and used his girlfriend's name. He sat in the back of his car on the way back to his office and said nothing, and looked out the window at Seoul moving past, and felt the particular cold of a man who is finally, completely allowing himself to know something he has been refusing to know for a very long time. What the Korean billionaire would discover soon would turn his world upside down. Okay, let us take a breather. Tell me what you think Tae-sung and Mirai had planned. What did Annabelle just stop? And how bad would that contract have been for Jihan? Tell us your thought in the comment section. Let us see if you think like me. If you are not subscribed yet, do it right now. Hit the notification bell. Because we post thrilling stories like this that'll keep you on your feet, and you don't want to miss any of our thrilling stories. Now, let's get back to the story. Jihan started going back to the restaurant more than usual. He told himself it was the samgyeopsal. And the samgyeopsal was genuinely good. That part was not a lie. Hanok's grilled pork belly was the kind of food that justified a 20-minute drive, slow-cooked, the fat rendered down to something almost sweet, served with banchan that the chef had been perfecting for longer than most of his staff had been alive. This was a reasonable thing. A man returning to a restaurant because the food was good. This was not complicated. This did not require examination. He told himself this the first time. He told himself this the second time. He was still telling himself this the third time when he sat at the window table and ordered the samgyeopsal and ate it without tasting a single bite because his eyes kept moving to the floor and to the corridor and to the tables she used. To move between and finding nothing and coming back empty every single time. It was her name that had stayed with him first. Annabelle. He had seen it on her name tag the day of the coffee. Just a glance. The kind of glance you don't plan. But it had gone in, and it had stayed in the way certain things stay, not because you chose to keep them, but because they chose to stay, and there was nothing you could do about it. Annabelle. He thought about the way she had moved through that restaurant floor, not performing, not arranging herself the way people arrange themselves when they know they are being watched, just moving, reading everything in the room with those eyes, and giving nothing of what she was reading away. He thought about the way she had spoken to him in that corridor, calm and direct, and completely unintimidated by what he was or what he represented, or the fact that she was about to lose her job for what she was saying. He thought about the way she said, "I'm sorry about your suit," at the end of it, like that was the thing that still needed addressing. He hated how much he thought about it. He was in a relationship. He had a girlfriend who called him every evening and who his father spoke about with the specific warmth of a man who had already started imagining a future that included her. Thinking about another woman, sitting in a restaurant 3 weeks in a row telling himself it was about the food when it was not about the food, was not something he was going to examine too closely, because examining it would require him to say out loud what it was, and he was not ready to say it out loud. But he wasn't able to help himself. He kept coming back, and she was never there. After the third week, he stopped pretending he was going to find her on the floor and flagged down one of the other waitresses instead. He asked about the waitress, with the name tag that said Annabelle. He described her briefly, the curly hair, the cat-shaped eyes, the way she carried herself through a room. The waitress's face did something before her mouth did anything. She had been fired the day of the coffee incident. A wealthy client had told the manager she had attacked him. The manager had not asked for more than that. Jihan sat at that window table with the samgyeopsal going cold in front of him and felt something move through him that had no interest in being quiet about itself. She had lost her job. She had lost her job because she had warned him, because she had stood in a corridor and told him the truth at the cost of the only thing keeping her afloat in a city where she had nothing and nobody and had been building everything from the ground up with her own 2 hands. She had done that for a man she did not know. For a stranger sitting at a window table who had not even had the presence of mind to ask her name before she walked away. He sat with that for a long moment. Then he left the samgyeopsal untouched on the table. He went to Taesung's office the next morning. Taesung was behind his desk when Jihan walked in. He looked up with the easy smile of a man who had decided weeks ago that the coffee incident was finished and had nothing more to say about it. "You had her fired," Jihan said. No greeting, no preamble. Taesung blinked. Who? The waitress. From the restaurant. Something moved across Taesung's face. Not guilt. Nothing that clean. Just a small recalculation happening somewhere behind his eyes. Jihan. She destroyed a $6,000 suit and ruined a contract. She spilled coffee. She spilled coffee, Taesung. Jihan's voice was level. The specific level of a man who is being very deliberate about staying level. You had her fired for spilling coffee. Why are you acting like this over some maid? Taesung said. The casual way he said it, the ease of it, like the word maid, was the most obvious and natural descriptor in the world, and Jihan's objection to it was the thing that was strange here. Some maid, Jihan repeated. He looked at his partner for a moment. You got her fired for one mistake. Yes, because clumsy, careless people shouldn't be serving clients like us. She destroyed your suit that would have paid her whole year's salary. Taesung leaned back. Comfortable, reasonable. The posture of a man explaining something obvious to someone who is being unnecessarily emotional about it. Honestly, Jihan, why does this matter to you? The contract is still pending, by the way, Taesung added. Smooth, natural, just a man moving a conversation forward. We should sort a new date. The shareholders are waiting. Jihan looked at him. He had known this man for 12 years. He had trusted this man with things he had not trusted to anyone else. He had sat across from him in rooms where the whole direction of a company was being decided and never once questioned whose side Taesung was on. Today he looked at him and saw someone he did not fully recognize. Her name is Annabelle, Jihan said. He sat back in his chair. Give the name to the team. Find her. I want her information on my desk. Taesung stared at him. Why would you? Find her and bring me the information, Jihan said. Each word the same weight. That's all. He stood, walked out of Taesung's office without looking back. Taesung sat behind his desk and looked at the empty doorway for a long time. Something had changed. He could feel it the way you feel, a shift in temperature, not yet cold but the warmth leaving. Something had changed in Jihan, and Taesung did not know how much of it was the waitress and how much of it was something else. And not knowing was the most dangerous thing that had happened to him in a very long time. Anna had cried exactly once. The night Soyi called her and told her what her father had said, that a wealthy returning client had informed the manager that the waitress had attacked him and he would not be returning if he ever saw her working there again. And the manager's hands were tied, and he was sorry, but there was nothing he could do. She had sat on her apartment floor and cried for 20 minutes. Not because of the job specifically, because she had student loan payments due, because her rent was going up in 6 weeks, because she had blown the best-paying job she had ever found on an instinct about a man she did not know and a surname she had no proof and meant anything, and she had done it in front of a full restaurant, and she could not even say for certain that she had been right. What if she had just been wrong? What if the man in the bathroom was exactly what he said he was? What if the transfer was legitimate? What if Kang Mirai was just a woman with a surname that Anna had been carrying like a wound for 15 years and it meant nothing? What if her father's death was exactly what they said it was and she had spent 15 years building a conspiracy out of grief because grief needed somewhere to go and accusation was easier than acceptance? She cried for 20 minutes. Then she washed her face, made herself rice from what she had in the kitchen, opened her textbooks. She went back to babysitting the next morning. The child she was assigned to that week was 4 years old and had very strong opinions about everything and communicated all of them at maximum volume. By the end of the first day, Anna had a headache that sat behind her left eye and refused to move. By the end of the week, she had developed a genuine respect for the child's commitment to her convictions, even if those convictions were mostly about the injustice of having to eat vegetables. She managed her budget. She cut what she could cut. She told herself this was temporary. She told herself she had survived worse. She had survived Daniel's house. She had survived 10 years of being looked through by people who should have been looking at her. She could survive losing a restaurant job. She told herself all of this, and she almost believed it. On the other side of Seoul, Lim Tae-sung was sitting across from Kang Mirai in the apartment they met in when they needed to not be seen together, which was all of the time. He had told her everything: the restaurant, the coffee, the waitress, the way Jihan had demanded her information. Mirai was listening in the way she always listened, perfectly still, her face giving nothing away, her eyes working behind the surface of it. What does she look like? She asked. Black American. Young. She speaks Korean. Taesung's mouth pulled slightly. Apparently, well. Mirai was quiet for a moment. And Jihan wants to find her. He gave the instruction himself. Pulled it out of nowhere. We were talking about the contract and he just... Taesung stopped. He's never done anything like this before. He doesn't do things like this. He's never had a reason to before. Mirai said it without any particular emotion. Just an observation about a fact. We need to find her immediately, Taesung said. Yes, we need to find her, Mirai said simply. And make sure she understands that staying in Seoul is not in her best interest. Taesung's phone buzzed on the table between them. He looked at the screen. Jihan. He looked at Mireille. She looked back at him with the flat, unbothered patience of a woman who had been doing this for 3 years and had not yet been caught. He answered, "Have you found her yet?" Taesung looked at Mireille across the table. She raised an eyebrow. Something moved between them that had nothing to do with the phone call. "We're working on it," Taesung said into the phone. The line went quiet. Taesung kept his face completely neutral. Across the table, Mireille's eyes had gone sharp and still. "Find the girl," Jihan said. "Bring me what you have." The call ended. Taesung put the phone down. Mireille was looking at him with an expression that lived in the space between concern and calculation. "He knows something," she said. "He suspects something," Taesung said. "There's a difference." "Not for long," Mireille said. She looked at the wall for a moment. "Find the girl quickly. Ensure you scare her first before you give Jihan her information," she said again. "Whatever it takes." What neither of them knew, what they could not have known, was that Jihan had not waited for Taesung's team. He had given the instruction to his own people the same day he walked out of Taesung's office. His own trusted team, people who reported to him and only him and had absolutely nothing to do with Lim Taesung. They had already found her. It was 10 p.m. on a Thursday when Anna heard the knock. She had just finished 4 hours with the most stubborn 4-year-old in Seoul, and she had come home with her feet hurting and her patience worn to something very thin, and the only thing she wanted in the world was to sit down and not be responsible for another human being for several consecutive hours. She opened the door without thinking, and Big Jihan was standing in her doorway. She stared at him. He looked back at her with something in his expression she could not immediately name. He was not in a suit tonight. Dark trousers, a simple dark jacket, his gold hair slightly less arranged than it had been in the restaurant. The tattoos visible on his hands, where his sleeves stopped. He looked like a man who had driven somewhere he had been debating driving to and had only recently finished the debate. "You found me," she said. Not a question. "I have a team," he said. "I'm sorry. I should have called first." "How did you get this address?" "The restaurant you were fired from. Your record's there." He said it directly, without dressing it up. "I'm sorry about the job. That shouldn't have happened." She looked at him for a moment. "It made a choice," she said. "I knew it would have consequences." He nodded. Then he said what he had come to say. "I think you were right about the contract. My partner hasn't stopped pushing for me to sign it since that day, and something about the way he's pushing, he stopped. I don't know what's wrong with it, but something is wrong with it." Anna looked at this man standing in her doorway in the dark, and something in her forensic mind was already moving, already turning the pieces over, already interested in a way she was going to have to be very careful about. "I can help you," she said. He looked at her, and there it was, that smile, small and brief, and slightly patronizing, in the specific way of a man who is trying to be polite about the fact that he does not think the offer is serious. She saw it immediately, and she did not like it at all. "I've worked harder cases than a messy love triangle," she said. Her voice was completely level. "I'm finishing a degree in forensic investigation. I know how to find things people are trying to hide. And from what I heard in that bathroom, your partner and your girlfriend are not just plotting against you, they are doing it from the same bed." The smile left his face. She watched his expression do the thing she had seen it do in the restaurant corridor, that specific shift of a man receiving confirmation of something he had been refusing to confirm for himself. The particular look of someone who has just been given permission to trust what they already knew. He was quiet for a moment. "You don't have a job," he said finally. "I'm aware. I need someone to work with me on finding out what this is. Someone I can trust who has no connection to anyone in my company." He looked at her. "I just want to make sure this is nothing. And if it's something, then I need to know what." "I'm still in school," she said. "Call it an internship," he said. "The pay will be enough to cover what you need." She looked at him for a long moment. Inside her, something leapt, the part of her that had been building toward this her whole life, toward finding out what happened, toward toward following the thing that didn't add up, toward using everything she had learned and everything she had survived for something that actually mattered. That part of her wanted to grab this offer with both hands and not let go. She kept her face level. "Give me your number," she said. "I'll be in touch." He nodded. He told her his number. She typed it into her phone without looking away from him. He looked at her for one moment longer than the exchange required. Then he turned and walked back down the corridor, and she watched him go, and she closed the door. And she stood in her apartment alone with the quiet of it, and felt something she hadn't felt since she sat on a street outside Daniel's house at 18 years old with her father's file pressed against her chest. Like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Like the thing she had been following all this time had just turned a corner and she could finally see it. She just didn't know yet what was waiting at the end of it. She was about to find out. The threat came before Jihan's offer had even settled into something real. She noticed them on a Saturday afternoon, walking home from campus with her bag over one shoulder and her mind still turning over a case study from her criminal profiling class. Two men, not together. That was the thing that made her notice them. They were not walking together. They were positioned the way people are positioned when they want to appear unconnected but are moving toward the same destination. Her destination. She had grown up in Daniel Cole's house. She knew what surveillance looked like. She had been watching it from the inside since she was 10 years old. She did not change her pace, did not look back, just walked home the way she always walked home and kept her breathing steady and her face forward and her mind running very fast underneath all of it. She got inside, locked the door, stood with her back against it for a moment. 2 hours later, the banging started. Not knocking, banging. The kind that is designed to communicate something beyond a request for entry. The kind that says, whoever is on the other side of this door has already decided how the conversation is going to go and is giving you the opportunity to cooperate before they make that decision for you. Then the voice, low, speaking Korean, directed at the door like it was directed at her face. "Leave, Seoul. This is your only warning. The next time we knock, it won't be on the door." Then silence. Then footsteps moving away down the corridor. Anna stood in the middle of her apartment, with the echo of it still in the walls, and her heart doing something loud and irregular in her chest. She stood there for 30 seconds, 40. Let her breathing find its level again. Then she picked up her phone and called Jihan. He picked up on the second ring. She told him what had happened, all of it. The men on the street, the positioning, the banging, the voice. She told it the way she reported everything, clearly, in order, without the emotion she was actually feeling getting into the telling of it. There was a silence on his end when she finished. Not a long one. "Don't go anywhere," he said. "I'm sending a driver, tonight." "Jihan, tonight," he said. "And I'm arranging somewhere safer for you to stay. Don't argue with me about this." She didn't. Because the voice through her door had been the kind of voice you did not argue with. The kind that meant what it said, with the specific calm of people who had said similar things before and had never had to repeat themselves. She packed what she needed. The driver arrived 40 minutes later. She took her father's file with her. She always took her father's file. 2 days after the threat, Tae-sung walked into Jihan's office and dropped a folder on his desk. He did it the way you drop something when you want the dropping itself to communicate something. A small performance of casual. The folder landing like a punctuation mark on a sentence he had decided not to say out loud. "Her details," Tae-sung said. "Don't know why you needed it so badly. You do have a girlfriend, you know." Jihan looked at the folder, then up at Tae-sung. "I know I have a girlfriend," he said. His voice was even. "Do you know she's my girlfriend?" The question landed the way he intended it to. Not quite an accusation, not quite not one either. Sitting in the space between those two things where Tae-sung had no clean answer. "So why are you so interested in the black lady?" Tae-sung said, keeping his voice light. Reasonable. The voice of a man who is confused by his friend's behavior and not threatened by it. "Her name is Annabelle," Jihan said. He looked at the door. "Annabelle, come in." The door opened. Anna walked in. She was dressed simply, wide-leg trousers, a fitted top, her natural hair out, her cat eyes moving across the room and landing on Tae-sung, with the specific quality of attention she gave to things she was already in the process of reading. She looked at Taesung the way she looked at everything. Directly. Without performance. Taesung looked at her. The disgust on his face was not hidden. Not entirely. It lived at the edges of his expression, in the way of something he had not decided to conceal, because he did not think it needed concealing. "You are curious about my interest in her," Jihan said, looking at his partner. "But I am also curious about your interest in her. Why are people following her all of a sudden, Taesung?" "I have nothing to do with anything concerning her," Taesung said. His eyes moved over Anna once, with the flat assessment of a man deciding something is beneath his notice. "I like my women paler," he said. The smile that accompanied it was the worst kind. The kind that knows exactly what it is doing and has decided that knowing is enough of an apology. Anna's eyes did not change, but her mouth did, just slightly, just enough. "Yeah," she said, under her breath, almost to herself. "Almost. You like women that don't belong to you." The room went very still. "What did you say?" Taesung said. His voice had dropped. Anna looked at him with the open, innocent expression of a woman who has absolutely no idea what he is referring to. "Me? Nothing, sir." She turned to Jihan. The innocence remained perfectly in place. "Did you need me for something, sir?" Jihan looked at her. Something moved across his face that he did not entirely manage to contain. Something that lived in the vicinity of impressed and was trying very hard to present itself as neutral. "No, Annabelle," he said. "I just wanted to introduce you to my partner." Taesung looked between them, at Jihan's face, at the woman standing in his partner's office with the composure of someone who had not just said what she had said, at whatever was sitting in the air between the two of them that he did not have a name for yet but did not like. He straightened his jacket, and he walked out. The silence after the door closed had its own texture. "You can't go around accusing people like that, Anna," Jihan said. There was something in the way he said it. Not quite a reprimand, the shape of one without the content of one. Like a man saying what he is supposed to say, while his face does something else entirely. Anna looked at him. "Noted," she said. "The way you didn't accuse your friend of sending people to my door." "I understand, boss." The word boss landed with a precision she had intended, and he felt it, and his eyes did something, a brightness, brief and quickly managed, that she catalogued and immediately set aside. She pulled herself back. "First thing," she said, her voice shifting. "Professional now. Completely. I need to establish whether there is a provable connection between your girlfriend and your partner. I don't want to keep making assumptions. I want to provide evidence." Jihan nodded, watching her. "I'll need to hire someone to track their movements for a week. 2 people, separately. I'll also need a copy of the contract, a photocopy, not the original. I'm taking it to a lawyer I trust outside your company. I want someone with no connection to you or your business reading it." She paused. "That's the plan for now. I'll update you in a week. Whatever budget you need," Jihan said. "Tell me directly, not through anyone here. I don't trust the channels." She nodded. Then he said it. "Do you need me for anything?" It was a simple question, a professional question. The kind of question you ask an employee you have just given instructions to. Except the way he said it created a silence between them that was not simple at all, and the way she heard it was not entirely professional either. And they both stood in that office for a moment, with the question sitting between them like something that had arrived from a direction neither of them had been watching. "No, sir," she said. After a pause that lasted exactly as long as it needed to, and not a moment longer, she left. Jihan sat in his office after she walked out and said nothing for a long time. He bit down on what was happening in his chest because he was a man who had a girlfriend, and the thought of that girlfriend betraying him was already more than he knew what to do with. He was not going to add anything else to that. He was not going to be the kind of man who did to someone else what was possibly being done to him. He was just going to find out the truth. That was all. That was enough. Anna got to work. She was 23 years old, and she was doing the thing she had been building herself toward since she was 13 years old, reading her father's file in the dark in a house that frightened her. She mixed school and the investigation the way she had always mixed everything, efficiently, with no wasted motion, sleeping less than she should, and not complaining about it. She hired 2 people through a contact from her forensic investigation program, former investigators, both of them, now freelance. She gave them Taesung and Mirai separately and told them she needed a week of documented movement, photographs, timestamps, locations. Then she took the contract to her lawyer. His name was Park Junho, 53 years old, semi-retired, the kind of legal mind that had seen enough in his career to be unbothered by most things. He read the contract the first time without comment. Then he read it again. Then he put it on his desk and looked at it the way you look at something that is showing you exactly what it is and you are trying to confirm what you think you are seeing. "This is clean," he said. "I know," Anna said. Standard CEO oversight language. He is the owner and overseer of the company. The contract states that all activities conducted this year are conducted under his oversight. That's not unusual for a document of this type. "I know," she said again. "Keep reading." He read it a third time. "It's clean, Annabelle," he said, gently, "the way you tell someone something they don't want to hear. I don't see what you're looking for." She went back to Jihan. She sat across from him in his office, not at his desk, in the chairs at the side of the room where they met when she had something to report, and she told him, "Clean." The contract read clean on every pass. The lawyer found nothing. Jihan was quiet for a moment. She watched his face, and what she saw there was complicated, not relief. Something that looked almost like guilt, the specific guilt of a man who had been hoping to be proven right about something terrible so he could justify the way he felt about the woman in front of him. Then her phone vibrated on the table between them. She looked at the screen. A notification from one of the trackers. She opened it. A photograph. Time-stamped 2 hours ago. Lim Taesung and Kang Mirai coming out of a hotel in Mapogu, a neighborhood neither of them had any professional reason to be in together. His hand at the small of her back, her face turned toward his. The body language of 2 people who had been doing this long enough that they had stopped being careful about it. She turned the phone to face Jihan. He looked at the photograph for a long time. His face did not collapse. It did not do the dramatic thing that faces do in films when something devastating is confirmed. It just went very still. The stillness of a man who is choosing, very deliberately, not to feel everything he is feeling right now, in this room, in front of this woman. "She's cheating on me with him," he said, quietly. "Just a fact. Just the plain, true shape of it." "I wasn't wrong about them," Anna said. "But I was wrong about the contract. Or, I think I am." "You probably aren't wrong about the contract," he said. He looked up from the phone. "If they are actually doing this, if they have been doing this the whole time, then there is something in that contract. I can feel it, Anna. I have been able to feel it since that day in the restaurant. Something is wrong with it." I looked. "Look again," he said. "Whatever you need, whatever it takes. I need to know what I am actually dealing with here." He paused. "She's cheating on me. With him. If I'm going to end this with her family, if I'm going to go to Kang Chelman to tell him that I am ending this relationship, then I need something solid, something he cannot argue with." She finally heard that name. The name on her father's file. Her father is not a man you approach without being certain. The room went somewhere else. Anna heard it the way she heard the surname in the bathroom corridor, before she processed it, before she could stop her body from responding. But this was different from the bathroom. This was not just the surname. This was the full name, first name and last name together. The name at the bottom of her father's file. The name she had been carrying since she was 13 years old. "Her father," she said. Her voice came out level. She did not know how. "Her father is Kang Chelman?" Jihan looked at her. Something in her face had changed, and he was reading it with the attentiveness of a man who had been paying attention to her face since the day she walked into his office. "Yes," he said slowly. "Do you know that name?" She looked at him for a moment. "Give me more time," she said. She went home that night, and she took out her father's file. She laid it on the table the way she had laid it on her bed in Daniel's house at 13 years old. She found the page. She read the name at the bottom of it. Kang Cheolmin. She sat with it for a long time. The woman Tae-sung had been on the phone with in that bathroom. The woman in the photographs coming out of that hotel. Jihan's girlfriend. Jihan's almost fiancée. The woman whose father had just been named by a man who did not know what that name meant to her. The same family. The same man. The man whose name was in her father's last business record. The man who had been in contact with James Cole 3 days before James Cole died in a car accident on a Tuesday morning in New York. She sat at her small table in her apartment in Seoul and felt 15 years of carrying something alone arrive at a place she had not expected. She was not working Jihan's case anymore. She had never just been working Jihan's case. She was working her father's. And the family that had been at the end of it all along was the same family that was trying to take down the man sitting across from her in an office on the other side of the city. She put the file down. She pressed her hands flat on the table. She took one breath, then another. Then she opened her laptop and she got to work. She started with the Kang family business. Not from the front, not the way you would if you were doing research casually, typing a name into a search engine, reading what they wanted you to read, accepting the surface of things. She went in the way she had been trained to go in, from the edges, from the documents that nobody looked at because they were buried under years of other documents. From the financial trails that moved too quietly to attract attention, unless you were specifically looking for something that was trying not to be found. Kang Cheolmin had built his empire over 30 years. Pharmaceuticals on the surface, legitimate distribution, licensed suppliers, the kind of business that had certificates on walls and government contracts, and a name that appeared in the right places at the right events. Respectable, established, the kind of operation that had been running long enough that people had stopped asking questions about it because the answers had always come back clean. She dug past the clean answers. It took her 4 days. 4 days of cross-referencing import and export records, distribution channels, financial disclosures filed in 3 different jurisdictions. 4 days of following money that moved in patterns she recognized from her coursework, not because she had seen this specific operation before, but because the shape of it was familiar. The way certain amounts moved. The way certain companies appeared briefly in transaction records, and then dissolved, and then reappeared under slightly different names a year later. The fingerprints of money that needed to travel without being tracked. On the 4th night, she found it. The connection between the Kang Pharmaceutical Distribution Network and the infrastructure of Jihan's AI company, Nexon Intelligence, one of the most legally airtight tech operations in all of Seoul. She sat at her laptop at 2 in the morning and followed it forward and backward and every direction it went, and felt the whole picture coming into focus the way a photograph develops, slowly, then all at once. Kang Cheolmin's network had been routing drug transactions through Nexon's data infrastructure for 14 months. Not clumsily, not in a way that announced itself, with the specific sophistication of people who understood exactly what they were working with. Nexon systems were designed to process enormous volumes of data from multiple sources simultaneously. That was the point of the technology. That was what made it valuable. And buried inside that legitimate data traffic, moving through channels that looked indistinguishable from everything else, was a pharmaceutical operation that had nothing to do with legal medicine. AI had become the newest and cleanest way to move drugs without getting caught. And Jihan had built the most legitimate AI infrastructure in Seoul. That was why Mireille had been placed into his life. That was why her father had mentioned her interest to Jihan's father with that particular, studied casualness. That was why a woman from the Kang family had decided she was interested in Baek Jihan specifically, not because of him, not because of anything he was as a person, but because of what he had built and what it could carry if you knew how to use it. 3 years of a relationship built entirely around access. She sat at her laptop at 2 in the morning and felt the specific cold of something clicking into place that you had been trying to find for a very long time. Then she called the lawyer, Park Junho. She was at his office at 8 the next morning with the contract and everything she had found spread across his desk. He read the contract again, this time with her research beside it. This time with the knowledge of what had been running through Nexon's infrastructure for 14 months, informing every word he read. She watched his face change. Not dramatically. Park Junho was a man who had spent 30 years in rooms where dramatic reactions were a luxury nobody could afford. But she saw it, the slight tightening around his eyes. The moment his reading slowed, because something had caught him that hadn't caught him before. He put the contract down, picked it up again. Read one specific section for the third time. The overseer clause, he said. Yes, Anna said. The contract states that all activities conducted under the company's operational capacity this year are conducted under the CEO's oversight and authority. He looked up at her. In a clean company, this is standard language, boilerplate. Nobody blinks at it. But Nexon isn't clean, Anna said. Not anymore. Not for 14 months. No, Park Junho said. He put the contract down carefully, the way you put something down when you are aware of what it is. If he signs this, if Baek Jihan signs this contract as the legal overseer of all activities conducted within Nexon's operational capacity this year, he is signing a confession to 14 months of drug trafficking he had no knowledge of. The words landed in the room and stayed there. He would be arrested, Anna said. Within months, once the right people had the contract in hand and the transaction records to match it. Park Junho looked at the papers on his desk. The shareholders would demand his removal the moment the arrest was made. An emergency CEO would be required. Lim Tae-seung, Anna said. Who is already in position? Who has been in position? Park Junho looked at her over his glasses. And with Jihan removed and Tae-seung running Nexon, the Kang network maintains its infrastructure access, continues operating. Kang Mirai ends up with the man she has actually been in love with the entire time. And Jihan spends the next several years in a courtroom trying to prove he didn't know what was running through his own company, Anna said. Which he cannot prove, Park Junho said quietly. Because he signed the document that says he oversaw all of it. The room was quiet. Anna looked at the contract on the desk. The same contract she had read 3 times and found nothing wrong with. The same contract that had looked completely clean because it was completely clean as long as you didn't know what was running underneath it. The trap was not in the contract. The trap was in everything surrounding it that the contract had been designed to attach itself to. She thought about a coffee jug in her hand. She thought about a decision made in 3 seconds by a woman who had been building herself toward this her whole life. She thought about Kang Chil-min, about a name at the bottom of a page, about a car accident on a Tuesday morning in New York that had never felt like an accident, about a father who had trusted his brother and paid for it with his life. This family, this specific family, had taken her father. And now they were trying to take Jihan with the same casualness, the same patience, the same willingness to use people as instruments and discard them when the instrument was no longer needed. She sat with all of that for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and called Jihan. Come to Park Junho's office, she said. I need you to see something. He arrived 40 minutes later. He walked into Park Junho's office and looked at the papers spread across the desk, and then at Anna, and something in the way she was sitting told him this was not going to be a small thing. She had the stillness of someone who has been sitting with something large, long enough to have made their peace with it. Sit down, she said. He sat. She told him everything. She started with the Kang family's pharmaceutical network. She showed him the distribution records, the financial trails, the companies that appeared and dissolved and reappeared. She walked him through the 14 months of transactions she had traced through Nexon's infrastructure, the data channels that looked legitimate from the outside and were carrying something else entirely underneath. She showed him the contract again. And then she showed him what the contract meant when you understood what it was being attached to. Park Junho walked him through the legal mechanics of it, the overseer clause, what signing would have done, what it would have made him responsible for, how it would have been used, when, by whom, to what end. Jihan sat across the desk and listened to all of it without speaking. She had seen him compose himself before. She had seen him manage his face in rooms where managing it was necessary. But this was different from composure. This was a man sitting completely still, while something he had built with his own hands and his own intelligence, and 12 years of his life was being shown to him in a completely different shape than the one he had believed it was. And underneath the business of it, underneath the contract and the network and the infrastructure, was 3 years of a relationship. A woman he had been falling in love with. A future he had been building toward in the back of his mind, whether he had admitted it to himself or not. Used. All of it. Every part of it constructed, placed around him like a set, while he walked through it, believing it was real. When Park Junho finished speaking, the room was quiet for a long time. Jihan looked at the contract on the desk. Then he looked at Anna. "You found all of this?" he said. Not a question. Yes. In how long? 4 days for the network. The contract took one more conversation with Junho once I had the context. He looked at her for a moment, with an expression she had not seen on his face before. It was not gratitude exactly. It was something that lived next to gratitude, but was bigger than it. The specific look of a man who has just understood that a person he underestimated was carrying something he did not have the capacity to carry alone. "My name," she said. "I need my name kept out of this completely. When you take this forward, however you take it forward, I was not involved. You found this through your own resources. That is the version that exists publicly." He looked at her. "Why?" She held his gaze. "Because the Kang family is dangerous," she said, "and I have been asking questions about them for longer than you know, and I need to still be standing when this is finished." He heard something in that. She could see him hearing something in it. The specific attention of a man who has just realized there is more behind a sentence than the sentence itself. He did not push. "Your name stays out of it," he said. "You have my word." She nodded. "Then let's talk about how you take this into that boardroom," she said. "Because when you walk in there, you need to walk in with everything. There cannot be a single exit they can use. Not one." Jihan looked at the papers on Park Junho's desk, and the cold, surgical, controlled part of him, the part that had built a billion-dollar company from an idea at 24 years old, came forward. "Show me everything," he said. She spent 2 weeks building the file. Every transaction record, every dissolution and reappearance of the shell companies, every documented movement from the trackers, Taesung and Mireille, in hotels, in private cars, in conversations that had been photographed through restaurant windows, the contract, Park Junho's legal analysis of the overseer clause, a second legal opinion she obtained without revealing whose company was involved. She built it the way she had been taught to build a case, layer by layer, source by source, every claim supported, every connection documented, every possible counter-argument addressed before it could be made. She went over it with Jihan 3 times. In his office, late in the evenings, when the building was empty and there was no one to observe them going through it, she would spread the documents across the low table by the window and walk him through each section, and he would ask questions, precise, intelligent questions, the questions of a man who understood what was at stake and was not going to walk into a room this important underprepared. Those evenings had their own specific quality. She was always aware of it, the particular warmth of working closely with someone towards something that mattered, the way he listened, not with the half attention of a man waiting for his turn to speak, but with the complete, focused attention of someone for whom what she was saying was genuinely the most important thing in the room. The way he looked at her sometimes when she was explaining something and she looked up and found him not looking at the documents at all. She always looked back at the documents. He always followed her lead. Neither of them said anything about it. There was nothing to say. He had a relationship to dismantle, and a company to save, and a family who had used him for 3 years to expose. She had a father's death to avenge, and a promise she had made to herself at 18 years old on a street in Seoul. They were not 2 people with time for anything else. They were 2 people with a job to finish. She kept telling herself this. It kept being mostly true. The morning before the boardroom, she called him. "The file is ready," she said. "I know," he said. "Every exit is covered. Junho has reviewed it twice. There is nothing they can say that isn't already addressed in what you're bringing in." "I know," he said again. And then, after a pause that had a particular quality to it, "Anna." "Yes. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever comes next, I want you to know that I know what this cost you. The job. the weeks of work, the risk of asking questions you were not supposed to be asking. A pause. I know. She was quiet for a moment. Just make sure it counts, she said. It will, he said. She believed him. The meeting was called for 10 in the morning. A routine shareholders review. That was what the invitation said. Quarterly performance, infrastructure updates, standard agenda items that nobody would look twice at. Jihan had sent it through the usual channels 4 days in advance, with the specific mundaneness of a man who was not planning anything at all. Taesung confirmed his attendance within the hour. Of course he did. The boardroom at Nexon Intelligence occupied the entire top floor of the building, floor-to-ceiling glass on 3 sides. Seoul spread out below it in every direction, the Han River catching the morning light to the south, the city moving through its ordinary Tuesday, the way cities do when they have no idea what is happening 30 floors above them. It was a room designed to communicate something. The size of it, the height of it, the particular quality of light that came through that glass in the morning. Jihan had chosen this building and this floor and this room 11 years ago when he signed the lease on an office that was too large for the company he had at the time, because he had known what the company was going to become, and he had wanted a room that already understood that. He walked into it at 9:55. His assistant had arranged the room the way he asked. Documents at every seat, water. The particular configuration of chairs that communicated this was a formal proceeding and not a discussion. He sat at the head of the table. He placed his copy of the file in front of him, and he did not open it. He looked out at Seoul and waited. They arrived in the order he expected. The shareholders first, 7 of them, the senior partners who had been with Nexon since the early years and whose presence gave the meeting its official weight. Then, the legal representatives. Then the 2 external board members who sat on Nexon's oversight committee and whose signatures would be required for any significant structural change to the company. Mirai walked in later. Then Taesung. He came in with the ease of a man who had been in this room 100 times and saw no reason why today should be different from any of those times. Dark suit. His hair perfectly arranged. The particular walk of a man who has always moved through powerful spaces with the confidence of someone who belongs in them. He saw the configuration of the room, and something moved behind his eyes. Brief, quickly, managed. He sat down, looked at Jihan across the length of the table. Jihan looked back at him. Nothing in his expression gave anything away. I wasn't expecting a full shareholders meeting, Taesung said. His voice was light, curious. The invitation just said, quarterly review. It is a quarterly review, Jihan said simply. Let's begin. He started with the company, not with the evidence, not with any of it. He started with Nexon, its founding, its growth, its position in the Seoul tech landscape, its legal record, its reputation. He spoke about it the way a man speaks about something he built with his own hands. With precision and without sentimentality, and with the specific authority of someone who knows every single thing about the thing he is describing because he was there for all of it. The shareholders listened. Some of them had heard versions of this before, but there was something in the way Jihan was speaking today that made the listening feel different, like he was establishing something, like every word was a brick being placed in a specific pattern that they could not yet see the shape of. Taesung was watching him. Anna had told him what to watch for, and he was watching for it. The moment Taesung understood where this was going, the moment the ease left his posture, and something else came in to replace it. It had not happened yet. Jihan kept talking. He talked about Nexon's infrastructure, the data processing architecture, the volume of transactions the system handled daily, the specific channels through which that data moved. He was technical, but not inaccessible. The kind of explanation that a room full of people who were not engineers could follow and understand, and that the legal representatives were writing notes on. Still nothing from Taesung. Still watching. Then Jihan opened the file. In the past 14 months, he said, Nexon's infrastructure has been used to process transactions that have nothing to do with Nexon's business. He said it the way he said everything, without heat, without performance, like a man reading a fact from a document because it was a fact, and it was in a document, and the room needed to know it. He placed the first set of records on the table. His assistant moved around the room distributing copies to every seat, the rustle of paper, the sound of documents being picked up and looked at. The quality of silence that changes when a room full of people starts reading something they were not expecting to read. These are transaction records from the Kang Pharmaceutical Distribution Network, Jihan continued, cross-referenced with Nexon's data processing logs from the same period. The correlation is exact. The Kang network has been routing transactions through Nexon's legitimate data channels, using our infrastructure as cover for a pharmaceutical operation that has nothing to do with legal medicine. The room had changed. The specific change of a room, when something that cannot be unsaid has just been said. People were looking at the documents, looking at each other, looking at Jihan, looking at Taesung. Taesung's face was still, the stillness of something that has been caught and has not yet decided how to respond. Mirae was shocked. She adjusted slightly in her seat, as though the chair became a little bit uncomfortable. I want to be clear, Jihan said, that Nexon's involvement in this operation was not sanctioned by me, was not known to me, was not authorized through any legitimate channel within this company. He looked at the table. It was arranged without my knowledge, through access that was provided to the Kang network by someone inside this organization. He looked at Taesung. The room looked at Taesung. Taesung looked back at Jihan with the expression of a man who is running calculations very fast behind a face that is doing its best to stay neutral. Taesung now slowly turned to face Mirae, whose look was cold. Jihan, he said. His voice was even. These are serious allegations. You can't simply put documents on a table and... I'm not finished, Jihan said. Taesung stopped. The second set of documents went around the table. This is a contract, Jihan said. A contract that has been presented to me 3 times in the past 2 months for my signature. I was told it was a standard operational oversight document, routine, necessary for the company's continued functioning. He let the room read it. He watched their faces as they read it, watched the legal representatives slow down at the overseer clause, watched one of them read it twice, watched the recognition arrive, not all at once, but in stages, as people understood what they were looking at. Park Junho had told him, the moment they understand the clause, in the context of the transaction records, the room will go very quiet. The room went very quiet. The contract states that I, as CEO, am the legal overseer of all activities conducted within Nexon's operational capacity this year, Jihan said. In a clean company, this is standard language. In a company whose infrastructure has been used for 14 months to route a drug operation, this is a signed confession. He looked at the legal representatives. If I had signed this contract, I would have been the legally responsible party for everything that has run through Nexon's systems this year. I would have been arrested. I would have been removed from this company. And the resulting vacancy at the top of Nexon's leadership would have needed to be filled. He looked at Taesung, by whoever was already in position to step in. The silence that followed was the longest in the room. Taesung's face had gone through 3 things in the space of 30 seconds. Jihan had watched all 3 of them happen. The first was the recalculation, the rapid internal assessment of how much Jihan knew and how he knew it, and what the options were. The second was the decision to try anyway. The pivot, the reframe, the exit strategy that a man like Taesung always had prepared, because a man like Taesung had always known that plans could go wrong and had always had a contingency. The third was the understanding that there was no contingency for this. This is circumstantial, Taesung said. His voice was still level, still the voice of a reasonable man engaging with unreasonable allegations. Transaction records that correlate with our data logs prove nothing about intent or involvement. You're making an enormous accusation based on the third set of documents, Jihan said. His assistant moved around the table again. These were the photographs, time-stamped, located, documented over 3 weeks by 2 separate investigators working independently. Lim Taesung and Kang Mirae. Not in one location, not on one occasion, in 7 different locations over 21 days, hotels, private cars, a restaurant in Mapogu. The body language of people who had been together long enough to stop being careful about it. The room looked at them. Tae-sung and Mirai looked at each other, now sweating. Something left his face that had been there since he walked in. Not composure, he still had that. But the thing underneath the composure, the confidence that had lived under everything he did in this room for 12 years, the bone-deep certainty that he was the smartest person managing the most information and that no one was going to catch up to him, that left. Kang Mirai, Jihan said, is the daughter of Kang Chelmin, the man whose network has been running through this company's infrastructure for 14 months. She has been in a relationship with me for 3 years. During that time, she has had access to information about Nexon's systems, its operational structure, its vulnerabilities, and its leadership dynamics. He paused. She also, as these documents show, has been in a relationship with my partner during the same period. One of the shareholders, a man named Woo Seok-jin, who had been with Nexon since the 2nd year and who said very little in most meetings, but whose opinion carried the weight of someone who had been watching carefully for a long time, put his copy of the documents down on the table. He looked at Tae-sung. Lim Tae-sung, he said. Just the name. Just that. Tae-sung looked at him. And what Woo Seok-jin saw in that look was enough. Anna had told Jihan, the moment Tae-sung stops trying to argue and starts trying to calculate his exit, you will see it on his face. A man can maintain composure. He cannot maintain the specific look of someone who still believes he is in control once that belief is gone. It was gone. Tae-sung straightened, looked at Jihan, made one last attempt. You have no proof that I knew about the Kang Network's activities within Nexon, he said. You have photographs of a personal relationship. You have transaction records that could have multiple explanations. You have a contract that I presented to you in good faith as a routine document. His voice was measured, careful. The voice of a man laying the groundwork for a legal defense in real time. None of this proves that I was complicit in anything. You're right, Jihan said. Tae-sung blinked. The documents on their own do not prove your complicity, Jihan continued, which is why I also have this. The 4th set of documents. These were the communications, emails, sent from a private server that had been traced back through 3 layers of anonymization by the 2 investigators Anna had hired. Messages between Tae-sung and a contact within the Kang network discussing the Nexon infrastructure access, discussing the contract, discussing the timeline, discussing Jihan, discussing the waitress. One message in particular, sent the night after the restaurant, Tae-sung to the contact. There was a complication at the signing. A waitress. I think she overheard everything. Deal with her. Her informations are attached to below. The room read it. In the quiet that followed, Jihan looked at his partner of 12 years and felt something that was not anger. Anger would have been simpler. This was colder and more complete than anger. This was the specific grief of a man who has just seen the full shape of a betrayal that has been in the room with him for years, and he was never supposed to know it. You had her fired, Jihan said, quietly. And when that wasn't enough, you sent people to her door. Tae-sung said nothing. 12 years, Jihan said, not loud, not broken, just the plain weight of it. 12 years. The room was completely silent. The legal representatives called for a recess at 11:47. They came back 20 minutes later with the specific expressions of people who have consulted each other in a corridor and arrived at a consensus they did not enjoy arriving at. The external board members requested Tae-sung's immediate suspension pending investigation. The motion was seconded by Woo Seok-jin. It passed. Tae-sung sat at the table and looked at the vote going around the room and did not speak. He had nothing left to say that would do anything. He understood this. Whatever calculations were still running behind his eyes were running for a different purpose now. Not this room, not this table. What came after? Security was called. Not dramatically. Jihan had not wanted drama. He had wanted precision. And he had gotten it, and that was enough. 2 security personnel appeared at the boardroom door and stood there with the patient professionalism of people who had been briefed and were waiting for the process to conclude. Mirai stood, her hands shaking. Tae-sung stood. He looked at Jihan one final time across the length of the table. Jihan looked back at him. There was nothing left to say between them that the room had not already heard. 12 years of partnership reduced to a table covered in documents and two men looking at each other across the wreckage of it. Taesung straightened his jacket, and he walked out. The door closed behind him. The meeting continued for another hour. Legal counsel, structural recommendations, the immediate steps required to secure Nexon's infrastructure and close the channels the Kang network had been using, a statement to be prepared for the shareholders, the process for notifying the relevant authorities. Jihan sat at the head of that table and managed all of it with the focused precision of a man who had a company to protect and was not going to stop protecting it because the previous hour had been the most difficult of his professional life. Woo Seok-jin stayed after everyone else had filed out. He sat across from Jihan in the emptied room and looked at him with the steady eyes of a man who had seen many things over many years and had learned not to perform reactions he didn't actually feel. "You knew for a while," he said. "I suspected," Jihan said. "I didn't know. What changed?" Jihan looked at the table, at the documents still spread across it, at the contract sitting in the middle of everything, the thing that had started all of it. The pages still carrying the ghost of coffee at their edges from where a woman with a jug had made a decision. "Someone showed me where to look," he said. Woo Seok-jin nodded slowly. He did not ask who. The meeting ended at 1:15 in the afternoon. Jihan walked out of the boardroom and down the corridor toward his office, and the first thing he did was reach for his phone. He typed a message to Anna. "It's done. It went exactly the way you said it would. Every exit was closed. He had nothing. Call me when you see this." He sent it. He walked the rest of the corridor to his office, sat down behind his desk, looked at his phone. No response. He waited. 5 minutes. 10. He called her. It rang. 4 times. 5. 6. Voicemail. He sat up straighter. He called again. It rang, and the ringing had a quality to it now that it had not had 30 seconds ago. The quality of a sound that is not being heard by the person it is meant for. He stood up. He was already moving toward the door when his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered it before the second ring had finished. The voice on the other end was not Anna's. It was a man's voice, calm and brief, in the way of someone delivering information they have been asked to deliver without elaboration. There had been an accident. The car assigned to Annabelle Cole, the driver. A road in Seodaimun district. He needed to come. Jihan stood in the corridor outside his office, with his phone against his ear, and Seoul, 30 floors below him, going about its afternoon, and the boardroom behind him, still full of the documents that had just dismantled everything Kang Cheolmin had spent 3 years building. He called her number one more time. It rang, and rang, and rang. And the sound of it, unanswered, patient, going nowhere, was the loudest thing in the building. Jihan walked into that boardroom this morning, and he left nothing standing. He closed every exit. He covered every angle. He did everything right. But while he was dismantling everything the Kang family built against him, Kang Cheolmin was already moving. And the car he gave Annabelle Cole to keep her safe is sitting on a road in Seodaimun right now. And she is not answering her phone. Is she alive? Is she hurt? Did Kang Cheolmin get to her before anyone could stop him? Oh my God. Annabelle was in an accident? Are you as curious as I am? Well, if you want the full details in the part 2, then share this video to people that'd like it. Like and comment part 2. Smash that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell, because you know we make interesting, thrilling, and emotional stories like this every week. And if you want to get our free ebook, How to Attract a High-Value Man Without Chasing, don't forget to click the link in the description below and join our waitlist. Bye for now. We will see you in the next one.